Hello, guys, and welcome back to the Dancing Heart podcast, the place that empowers and inspires you to live in alignment with your heart and joy. I'm your host, Torni Wiggum, here to bring you deep conversations with inspiring guests about purpose, empowerment, and living in alignment. Let's get dancing into this week's episode. Welcome to a new episode of the Dancing Heart podcast. In today's episode, I have invited beautiful Mathilda Isaksson directly from her van in Finland. She is an intuitive coach and guide, multi-passionate soul, wellness advocate, and human design enthusiast. Welcome to the Dancing Heart podcast, Mathilda.
Well, thank you so much for having me here. It's going to be so exciting to speak about our purpose, since that's definitely something we connect about. So, yeah, let's see what happens today.
Let's see what happens. And as the human design enthusiast that you are, that's going to be the topic for today's episode and how we can use human design as a tool to navigate your purpose. But first of all, I always have this question to my guests, and that is, what makes your heart dance today, Matilda?
Mm. Oh, I love that question. Today, so I think in general, like right now, I'm here in my van, so I live full time in this van, and I love to be in nature. And today, I found this beautiful parking spot, and there's snow. We got snow yesterday, and I'm so excited. And I went on a walk in the forest with my dog, who also lives with me here in the van. And I think that, like, being able to start my mornings the way I want to do it and go out in nature and really connect and be present. And I feel like that is also what is the most important thing for us to be just present in this moment. And that's something that brings me so much joy to tune into and be. So, yeah, today that is that.
I love it. I can just see the your van in the background, and you said that you found a beautiful parking spot and you got snow. So, what a beautiful way to start your day, and to also this is the way you live your life. And with your dog in this van, and you're traveling. I know that you've been to Norway too, but you've been traveling around the Finland and a lot of places with your van.
Yeah.
And it's like, this is also a way to live your life because you're multi-passionate. You can do whatever you want. And today we're going to talk about human design. And it's like, how has human design helped you to really connect deeper with your purpose path and to like chose this lifestyle that you are doing, that you're living right now, and to do everything that brings you so much joy?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So if we go back to just how I've been, how I am, when I grew up and always when I was in high school and when I started uni, like I was always someone who had a lot of things going on all the time. And a part of me was kind of like I was all the time trying to navigate my purpose. Like I knew that I was made for more. I knew there was something, like even in the darkest like times in my life. I felt like, okay, but there is something there. But then I had like all these different things going on all the time. And I'm like, well, this isn't how it's supposed to go. Like, how, like, I'm doing too many things and trying to navigate. And I was in uni, I was studying biochemistry, and then at the same time I had this like business with working on like marketing for another business. And then I was interested in spirituality and self-development. That's been something that's been a part of my life, like even when I was like growing up, because my mom's been in that space. So I had like a bunch of things that I was interested in, and I was like kind of like struggling with like, why is there so many things? Like I need to stick to one thing. And then when I started to when I did this coaching certification, which you also have done, this self-purpose thing, that's when I bumped into human design. And when I read that I am a manifesting generator who is supposed to do a lot of things, and we're here to be multi-passionate, we are good at, like, the first thing I think I learned was like when we think about multitasking, like we are the only energy type who are actually capable of doing that. And it's like we're even supposed to do that. And when I read that, I'm like, oh my God, like everything makes sense. Like I actually like I've been trying to like dim my light and be like, oh, I can't be all these things. I can't be interested in this and that and do all these things. But actually, yes, I am. Like that is who I am, and that's actually my superpower. So I felt so seen in that, and that's when like yeah, that's when I started to dive deeper into human design, and of course then learn like there are so many other things. And I just like looked at my chart, and I was like, wow, like this, like for me, human design has been probably the only system so far. Like I've gone through a lot of different healing modalities. I've worked a lot on my like limiting beliefs and my patterns and really like dove deep. But I think human design is the first like system that I have encountered where I can actually see like everything I have felt during my life, everything I've gone through, like all the patterns. Like I can literally see it in front of me when I look at my chart. And that for me is like mind blowing. And of course, there's like the part where, like, at least now, this past like few months when I've really dove in deep into this even more, it's brutal to look at that because it's like, shit, here's everything. Like, this is me, like everything that I am, all the conditioning, also all the superpowers and everything. And then what for me this journey has been is to navigate how to use this as a tool, for example, towards my purpose. So it started with me becoming a certified soul purpose and spiritual life coach. And for me, I always knew like purpose is something that I want to work with. And then I found human design, which is like, okay, here is actually like it's faster if we look at this chart and we can just like see like, oh, here, let's look here, or hey, you're like this, so that's gonna help. And that's the most important thing for me with this is like using it as a tool to help you go where you want to go. And also human design, like it is a tool, it's like a science about our differentiation. So we're all unique souls. And in human design, that is what the knowledge is about. So, hey, you're like this, I'm like this. And then the journey is about accepting that this is who I am and this is who you are. And then just figuring out how to bring the best aspects of ourselves like to the surface, or see like, hey, when I'm with this person, this is what comes up to the surface in me. And when I'm with this person, it's different. And today we're going to talk about the G Center, and that's a lot related to this of kind of navigating who you are with different people. And if that changes depending on if you have an undefined or defined center. So
Wow. Yeah, wow. Thank you so much for sharing this, Matilda. And it's so beautiful that you think you've been like weird, like why can I not choose this one thing? And I think a lot of people has that. It's like something is wrong with me because society is telling you that what are you gonna do when you grow up? What are you gonna study? It's like, hey, I want to study three different things. Nobody says that. It's one thing, it's that direction. And you were like, there must be something wrong with me. Or not wrong, it's like, why can't I pick and choose? Until you discover now human design. It's like, yeah, because you're supposed to. You're supposed to do all of these different things. And that lights your soul up as a manifesting generator. And I love that. And it's such a great tool to use as how to navigate and to really embody more of your gifts and to like, yeah, and to be more of who you actually came here to be. Like you said, we are all unique and we have all different gifts and unique purposes. So there's no need to like follow anybody else. Like follow your own intuition and your own inner guidance and trust that, because that's going to take you where you're meant to be going in this lifetime. So this is amazing. So for anyone that's like new to human design, can you just give like a quick um just say something? What I know that you said a lot about it, but like there are some different energy types, and it's taking also astrology into the chart, and it's all these different aspects of unconscious and conscious as well. So yeah,
yes.
please
Yeah, so what is human design? Um, so basically how it works is, like you said, maybe a lot of people know astrology, like we put in our birth time, and that is how the chart is generated. But what human design does, it takes a lot of these old knowledges and put them together with new modern sciences. So it takes, like, for example, the chakra system. Like if you look at the chart, you can kind of see like, oh, there are these different centers. And the difference with human design and, for example, the chakra, or like why there are different things, is that in human design, we see the whole essence of us as a nine-centered body. So instead of having the seven chakras in human design, when it came, so how it came into this world was in 1987. There was this guy called Ra Uru who channeled this information from the voice, it was called. And then after he got the information, then he started to, with different people, to develop like this information, because at its core, it's very like mathematical. So there is this chakra, and there's the tree of life and I Ching and like all these ancient like knowledges where we have been looking at a human. And then it also takes in consideration, for example, like physics and biochemistry and stuff. And when I learned that, first of all, I've been studying biochemistry, and then I'm like, oh, it's here also. Like that was also like such a beautiful part and like sign for me, like, yeah, this information. But anyhow, so one thing he channeled in 87 was that there are these neutrinos that are like atoms that, work with our energetic field and body. And at that point, it wasn't yet like discovered by science. But now it actually is something that is like even proven with science. So it's amazing to see like how this knowledge came into the world, and then how things like, of course, always we know like science, it's a bit behind, like we're all talking about the same thing, but then takes a little while for science to catch up. But he also channeled that this about these centers, like in 1781 or something like this, are human. So before it been like Homo sapiens, that's like our human, like what we are called. But after that, we became from seven-centered beings to nine-centered beings, and now we're called Homo sapiens intransitus. So this means
Mm.
that we're becoming different. Like even if you look at humanity, like nowadays we feel a lot more, like emotions are a thing. And if we think about, back like many years ago, it was more about instinct. Like that's how we know like humans evolved, and now we're so intelligent, and like the emotional intelligence that we have. So this is what human design kind of takes into consideration, that actually we're very intelligent in our emotions and becoming even more that, and it's becoming a bigger part of our lives as well. So that's kind of how it came into the world. And it's like, even for me, how it came into the world and what it means and all like the technical stuff, like I don't really care about that, to be honest. Like for me, it's more about like, okay, but what can I do with this information? Like, what is it giving to me? And that's where I found that it's so beautiful, because it gives you like this system where you can actually experiment. Like, is this true for you? And for me, that resonates so much, because we know we're all unique. And even with me going through like all these different modalities, and then like, oh, you're supposed to be like this, or like, this is how it is. And then here it's like, for me and the people like my mentors and who I've learned human design from, they really like point out like it's about the experiment. Like here's the knowledge, and then you test, is it true for you? I'm not going to tell you that, hey, you are like this, and put you in a box, but actually like, okay, here is a tool, and now you test if it works for you. And that's when we go into the chart. So there is the type, which for me, I'm a manifesting generator, and I know you are a generator. And then we have projectors, reflectors, manifestors. This is like the big kind of first surface level. Like, okay, there are these different types, and this is how your aura works. So you're here either to do a lot of things, so generate energy, generators, or projectors are here to see things, and reflectors are here to reflect, and manifestors are here to initiate and do what they want. So there's like this thing. And then we come to authority and strategy. And that is why this is such a good experiment, because the point is that we want to, so a lot of people live their life through listening to the outside world. So we're conditioned to like, this is how you're supposed to be, this is what you're supposed to do, listen to the authorities. And human design, what it does is that it brings the authority from the outside to the inside. So we all have this unique intuition, we can use that word, or inner authority. And by learning how that looks like and feels like for you as an individual, then that is something you can always like kind of lean back on. Like that is, then you'll know like where you're going. And I think when we speak about soul purpose and stuff, like there is like when you start to listen to your own inner voice, then at least for me, like you can't go wrong. Like there, like you just automatically you start aligning your life with your purpose. So human design gives this tool called the inner authority of how that might show up for you. So you know, like, oh, I'm supposed to listen to my sacral voice, who is very like, yes, I have energy, or I don't have energy. Or then if you're an emotional authority, you have this emotional wave. And for us, I'm an emotional authority, for example.
Me too.
Yeah. So for us, it's the wait for the emotional clarity. So for us, there is no truth in the now. But for someone with sacral or splenic authority, it's like right now, that's like how we know. So by learning kind of how the mechanical way works for you, then we can use that as a tool. And that's the main thing I say. But then there's also like if you look at your chart, there's going to be a lot of things and it can
Yeah.
be quite confusing. But once you learn about your energy type, and then you go into strategy and authority, and then when we talk about purpose, also the profile line. So you're going to be like two different numbers, and those are also a good way to look at like, okay, how do I embody this? And then there's a bunch of more. But did that maybe explain a little bit about what you and
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you so much. I also learned something new about human design by you just explaining all of this. So thank you, Matilda. And I know that you said you were talking about the 9 centers in our body, like 9 different energy centers, and the G center specifically is tied to the purpose. And I know that we also it's a difference between if it's defined or undefined, is it open or closed? And I know that you have an open undefined G center, but I have like an defined one. So how can you use the G center to really to navigate more with your purpose?
yeah. So if you now have, let's say you have your chart in front of you. So I talked a little bit about the 9 centers. So there's going to be, like you can see there's like this human looking thing, and then there's these centers. And the center in the middle, so every center has a different theme. So for example, the throat center, that's about how we express ourselves, how we speak. Then there's when I talked about the authority and the emotional. So there's the solar plexus, which is emotional center. So that's all about the emotions. And always when we have, so you either have defined, so that means it's colored in, or it's undefined, so it's white. And when it's defined, that means that that center has constant energy. So you have, like, you can tap into this energy all the time. But then if it's open, so it's white, then that means that it's going to be inconsistent and it's going to be you reflecting your environment. So that energy will come from the outside, and it's kind of like it's going to just flow through you, and you're going to like, oh, you're going to take this. And then, when you go into your own aura, so let's say you meet someone and then you're with them, and then you're like, oh, why do I, let's say, feel like this? So someone with not like an undefined solar plexus comes next to me, and let's say I'm that day like very depressed or something, and then they're going to come to my aura and then they start to feel depressed, or they're like, what is this feeling here? So that's kind of how it works. So then when we look at the different centers, it can kind of guide us, especially when it comes to our purpose. Like, first of all, always where there is openness, you know that that's something that the outside is going to reflect to you. And there's so much wisdom in that. So then when we look at the center of us, our being, so that's going to be our G center. It's called the identity center. It's all about love and direction. And when we go back to how human design came to be or what it is, like this center, that is where we have our, it's called like this magnetic monopole. So before we were even born, like when we were, when our soul became, or when our soul entered our body, so when we became to be, that is when this monopole was like, okay, it got stuck into this being of ours. And it's what is going to guide us in our life. And it's this magnet that's either going to have, if it's defined, this like, okay, solid, like this is the direction we're going, or it's going to be open when we reflect, but it's still going to be there. So it's going to guide us, but it's just going to look different. So now when we come into what it then means to have a defined or undefined G center, for me, this was also like, if I talk about like what changed my life the most when I learned about human design, or just in general, what changed my life, first one was definitely learning that I'm a manifesting generator. Then I think the next one was my emotional authority, because I was so confused. Like, why do I feel happy this day, and then the next day I can feel like with no reason I'm gonna feel depressed. So I learned like, oh, that's actually how I am. And then the third one, and definitely the one that's now been affecting me the most, is that I have an undefined G center. So for me, there is no sense of identity. Like I told before, was like, if you have it defined, it's like constantly there. But if it's open, it's not going to be constant. So for me, if I look back at my life, I'm like, why? Like, the story that I've always been telling people, I'm like, yeah, like when I grew up, like I had so many friends, and in this friend group I was this person, and then in this friend group I was this, and at uni studying biochemistry, I was definitely not this spiritual hippie living in a van. Like, there I was different, but I was able to be different. And I was like, for me, then I was trying to figure out like, but who, like, if I'm this different person everywhere I go, then who am I really? Because if I'm at uni in this scientific field, I'm gonna be this version of Mathilda, and that version is gonna have some maybe different thoughts, or I can maybe express the other side who is then super spiritual. So I was kind of like, but who am I then? If I'm like kind of both, but then yeah. So I was trying to figure out, who am I, and why can't I be just one thing once again? And then I learned that I'm not supposed to be one thing. And now if you have an undefined G center, it means that you reflect the people you are around. So for us, it's extremely important who we are with and what environments we're in. So you probably maybe have noticed, like, if you, for me at least, if I hang out with certain people, it's like I feel like I become them. So if I choose to be with people who, because we still, of course, in a way, we have a sense of who we are. So let's say I'm interested in wellness and well-being, but if I hang out with people who don't care at all what food they eat or what information they absorb, and they're very much in this like victim mode, let's say, and I'm around them, after a while, like, it's like I can't really even do anything about it. Like, I'm just gonna absorb, because I'm feeling their energy. I'm like reflecting, and I'm tuning into their energy. So I kind of become that person. So it's like I suddenly start to eat shit and I start to think shit. And it's like it just becomes me. And that is fine, because that is, how we are supposed to be. But then when we learn that this is just what happens, then we have a choice to make, that, okay, if I know that this is what happens when I surround myself with certain people, then do I choose to go and be with those people? And that's kind of where we have the choice of like where our direction goes. Because with a defined center, it's like, like if you really tune into your inner, like who you are, you have a sense of purpose. Doesn't mean that now maybe someone with a definer like, but I don't know my purpose. And it's like, yes, that can feel like that, because that's where the conditioning comes in, because you know who you are, but the world is teaching you not to be who you are. So like be less, be like that, blah blah blah. So you have this struggle of like, but I kind of know who I am, but I can't be that. And then you tell the story of like I can't be that, and then you become something different. But you still have like, if I compare a defined, like let's say with you, for example,
Yeah, I am a
you have
defined.
this, yeah, you're like, you have this like dance thing, and you're like, even before this you were guiding me in this meditation, it's like, yeah, this disco ball thing, and like that's who you are, that's like kind of your brand. And I know that that's what to expect because that's who you are. But then with me, I, like I said, like in one group of people I can be this version, and then in another. And then I had one friend send me, she was like, I feel like you just like change, like I came with another friend, and then she's like, I feel like you were a different person. And I'm like, and then for me it's like, but I was me. But of course, if I'm reflecting back who I'm with, it's gonna be a little bit more fluent of like, okay, in this, maybe I'm more outgoing because I'm reflecting back who is outgoing. Or if it's someone who is super quiet or just kind of like, then maybe I'm gonna not be so much or so much. Let's say it's not that word too much, but I'm not gonna be maybe so loud or, So of course, I'm like tuning into the other person because I can feel their purpose and who they are. And do you actually want to say something to this? I feel like I'm just going on.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's very interesting because it's like, hey, if I invite you into my world for a day, would you be out there like dancing with me on the disco floor then?
Oh, definitely. And it's also funny because I was looking at your chart, and so basically if we look at the, let's now take G center because that's what we're talking about. So always when we look at like what, so there are these different numbers which are called gates. And then if one gate, there's like two gates in different centers and they connect. So there's this channel that goes from one center to the other. So for you, for example, you have the sacral is connected to your G center via the 214 channel, which is about identity and direction. It's very much about empowerment and your purpose. And when someone is in your aura, it's like they feel like, oh, I know where I'm going. Like you have this like sense, which is like, it makes sense that you are, this is what you do. You literally empower people. And that's what we who don't have it defined, that's what we're going to sense. And me as an undefined, I become like, first of all, if we have undefined, we sense the other person's direction and potential very often. So for me, in past relationships, that is what I might have fallen in love with because I can kind of like, I go into, like, I become that and I'm like, oh, there's so much potential, there's so much this. And then I'm like, yes, let's go there. And then the other person maybe isn't, yeah, there is a lot of potential. So it's good to be aware when, like, let's say when I'm with you, like I know that for me, it's good to be around you because you work on yourself. You're like in your purpose. You're doing similar things that I want to do. So if we think about guiding, like, okay, how do I find my purpose if I have an undefined G center because I don't know what my purpose is, then for us, it's to find the right people to be with who brings then that out of us. So when I was meeting my mentor and she has a defined G center, she told me, she's like, you have undefined. Yeah, I recommend being around me because it's
Yeah.
like we really need to be so careful who we are around because it's like, and of course, like life isn't serious and we're here to experiment and every lesson is to be learned, so it's not like, oh, now I need to be very careful who I'm around, but it's just something good to notice that it is like, it's like this life hack kind of. If you know, like, oh, I want to be like this, then go and be with a person who is like this because you are going to become that. So it's a good, yeah. And then one thing also that helped me a lot because I was kind of struggle. Well, it's been a struggle of mine. And I think when we look at the undefined centers in general, like that is where our biggest like life lessons are, because that's where we are conditioned the most. And that's where we need to learn how, like, what is mine and what is not mine. So for me, I was kind of like, okay, but how do I then like I keep finding myself in these situations and turning into this person that I don't know if I want to be. And then my mentor told me, she was like, you know what? Just like don't think about like, oh, do I love this person? Do I like this person? Do I want to be around like don't focus on the other person. Turning back to yourself and ask yourself, do I love the version I become when I'm around this person? And that is what is going to guide us. So
Mm.
instead of trying to focus like this is where I want to go, because we don't know where we want to go, focus instead on the present moment. Like, okay, in this moment, how do I feel being me? Because it's going to be different depending on where you are and who you're surrounded with. And that for me was like a key, because I'm like, now I understand. Because of course, if we look like if you have an undefined G center, if you look back at your life, first of all, you usually see a theme. So for me, for example, I've always known there's something more. I've always like this purpose thing. It's been something that I've always like, even when I was in like middle school and elementary, I was like, I know there is something bigger for me. Like this is not the life I want to live. So I have this theme of like finding my purpose. It's always been there, but how it looks like might be different. Like I might be in uni, like learning about biochemistry, and then I might be becoming a spiritual life coach, and then I might be doing marketing for different businesses, and then I'm navigating like, okay, but what does this look like? But the whole purpose there is that, okay, but I want to, let's say, empower people to live a life that brings them joy, fulfillment, and purpose. And for me, it's going to look different every day. But the guiding line there is, do I feel joy? Do I feel fulfilled? Do I feel like I'm living my purpose? And for me, I can say like, yes, it does feel like, of course, not every day, but it's like, that is the guideline, like those words instead of like, I am this business coach or I am this spiritual hippie living in a van and that's my whole identity. Like, no, I have these things and then I can tap into what serves me in the moment.
Exactly. I love that. It's like it's more about detaching from one certain title and like, hey, this is my kind of like my mission statement. And that
Yes.
can look different with different things that I do. It's like, okay, I still do the same thing, but it's like it serves different titles and you're detaching yourself from that one title because you're multi-passionate, we're multi-dimensional. And that is, hey, what do I like this version of myself that I'm becoming when I'm doing this? And it's kind of like tuning into yourself and feeling into that emotion. It's like, oh, do I feel empowered? Do I feel fulfilled? Do I feel joyous? And environment is such an important thing for, I think, for everyone, but
Yes.
especially
Yes.
for undefined, like open G centers. Like, hey, be aware of how you want to feel and then look for that feeling instead of who you or I want this,
Yeah.
like how you want to feel. That is such a great, that's, I love that statement that you said, that phrase. That was really
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah, it really resonated. And I think like not just with the G center, but everything in your openness. Like because you need to be aware that you are reflecting your environment and the people. So if it's like I also have an open spleen center, which is about fear. So if I'm around people that feel a lot of fear, I'm gonna multiply that feeling and I'm gonna feel it like a lot. So I didn't understand this. And then now I'm like, oh, so it's not actually mine. And now, like, of course, in human design, like, depending on kind of what, who you learn from, and if you go to the original knowledge, it's going to be a bit more brutal. But because for me, I've also taken in a lot of other, like, all our experiences, it's like there's no right and wrong. It just is. So for me, let's say, I also believe that if you learn tools of like how to ground yourself, how to release different energies, like that's like, yes, if I go with someone who is very fearful, I'm going to pick that up. But then if I have the tools to, okay, release the energy, then of course I'm going to get back to like the aligned me faster. But if you
Mm.
don't have tools, if you're not aware at all, it can be very hard. Like when I was a child, I had a lot of panic attacks and I was just like so scared. And then now if I look back, I'm like, okay, but how much of that was actually because of my environment and who I was surrounded with, rather than just like being with myself. So I think it's a very like fascinating thing to start looking at, like where do I pick up on others people's energies, where is it my own? And then in human design also, there is this part in your chart where you can look like what is your ideal environment. And
Yeah,
for
I
me,
seen that.
yeah, it's very good
What's
because
yours?
mine is caves, and
Oh, wow.
it's so funny because when you go to the knowledge and it's like how they describe caves is yeah, it's kind of like you can think of like a car, you know, you have the doors, you can shut them and then you can be there in your own space and it's safe. And then I'm looking around and I'm like, huh, no wonder I find myself living in a van and
Yeah, I
this
was
feels
gonna
very
say that.
safe. So
That's so funny.
I think that's like it's such a good thing to, it doesn't even mean that you need to look at your chart and be like, oh, this is how I'm supposed to be, or oh, that, you know, but usually, mostly, I find people already knowing that. It's like every time I tell someone in a reading, like, oh, yeah, you have this, and they're like, yes, I know, oh my God, and that's okay, you know, or you find yourself like, at least the more, like, let's say everyone who's listening here today, you probably are in this self-development space. You've gone through, like, you're interested in how you work and what patterns show up and so forth. So, most likely, a lot that I could see in your chart is something that you're already doing. You already know that is happening. And then the point is just to like become aware and then listen to your strategy and authority and go forward from there. So if there's something you want to change, or like let's say for me, if I go work in a cafe, if for me in my cave environment, it's ideal to be in the back corner, back to the wall, so that I see everyone, so I feel safe. So
Mm.
if I go to the cafe and then I sit there in the middle, I'm probably not going to get as much done because I'm gonna, inside of me, unconsciously, there's going to be this little like uncomfortable, maybe fear of like, oh, like I don't know who is behind me or like what's going on. So that's going to distract me. But because I'm aware that okay, for me it's actually better to be in the corner, and most likely that's of course where I want to go, but let's say there's someone who is sitting there so I can. So when you are aware of what supports you the most, and you can kind of like, okay, well, I have two choices. There's like that corner seat, and then there's this middle part. Okay, I know it's more supportive for me to go there to the corner, so I'm going to go there. So it's these like tiny things that you can adjust. And in human design, they also say that when you go and live in your environment, so your ideal environment, then you're all, so it's going to be like the perfect way for you to start living your purpose because it's your natural environment where you thrive the most. So it's like you have like the best kind of tools, or like the best, yeah, opportunity to even start living your purpose because you feel more safe and your nervous system is more calm and supported in that. So very
Nice.
fascinating things.
Yeah, it is. It's very aligned, and it's kind of like I see human design is kind of like a confirmation of, oh, that's why I've been drawn to this, and that's why I always like, you just reflect back, and it makes sense because then it tells it in your chart basically. So yeah, I'm a shores person, and I love the ocean. I've always been drawn to the ocean, and kind of like I want to have the overview
Yeah.
of everything. So, and it's yeah, and I was also wanted to say that when you know these things, it just aligns you faster. It gets you,
Yes.
it closing the gap of like, hey, should like making decisions. You know, it's like, okay, I'm gonna choose that one, and from the you have this choice to like knowing you have these options, and then you have these three choices, like I pick that one because that's a line, I know that.
Yeah.
So it helps you to go faster and leaning into your purpose and your unique frequency and energy.
Yes.
So I
Yes.
love that.
And for that, I want to describe why we specifically love that because when we come to the profile lines, which is something like for me, I love looking at human design as like this life hack, and especially in business. Like, oh my goodness, like I do business consulting and coaching, and when I like now that I brought in human design, it's like it's so much easier. So for us, line two is because you're a 6-2 and I'm a 2-4. Like the line two is this natural. It's like it loves things to be just like easy and let's do it faster. And so for us, having this system where we can like kind of, and especially also for manifesting generators out there, like we love to skip steps. So if you have like this system in front of you that kind of like, okay, yes, you're probably going to figure it out on your own at some point if you're on this path. But here is like this thing that you can just look at right now, and it's going to tell you the steps. And then it becomes more about the embodiment and actually learning yourself to live this way or like take kind of the easy way. Because, we want to, well, our mind is telling us a lot of things, how we should, and oh, it can't be this easy, or oh, it should be like this. So here it's at least like you become aware of the natural state and maybe like the fastest way, but then it's not easy to actually follow it. I'm not saying that like, oh, this is gonna help you and save you and it's gonna provide you with everything. Like, no, it still starts with listening to the authority. So you have the tool, like this is how your intuition works, but then it's your choice if you're gonna actually listen to it and do that. And that's where the journey, and that's where all like, because you could become so aware of your actions that it's, yeah, and it's not for everyone. It's not an
No.
easy path, but it's like, at least for me, like, wow, this has changed my life and it has given me so much joy. And just,
Yeah.
yeah, it's so fascinating.
It is very fascinating. And I became more aware, like, it's not like we are, when I started to, like, oh, this is why okay, I'm supposed to be this, supposed to be the hermit, and I'm have an open heart chakra. So I'm here to bring, to be the voice of other people. And that's what I'm doing with my podcast. I'm like, yeah, that's very aligned with what I came here to do, and to be like using my unique gifts here. So,
Yeah.
and that is also bringing me to, you were talking about, you can see your north node and south node also in human design, and that is also related to astrology if you if you're into that. We talked about that in the episode with Giselle. But yeah, how do you see that in, how does that show up in human design?
Yeah. So, like I've said, there's like so many places you can look at. Like for me, with human design, like I love to kind of, like let's say someone is struggling with something and there is something going on in our life, and then there's this question, and then through that question, like even now the question is like, okay, how do we look at our purpose through human design? So how do we look at X through human design? And when it comes to purpose, like also in astrology, south node and north node, it's about like, this is the journey we're walking in this lifetime. Like this is what where we're at, or this is what we learned, and now we're going towards this. So in human design, there is also, we have the south node and north node, and if you look at those gates, so you can look at, okay, which centers are they in, which profile lines are they connected with, so you kind of know, like there's the journey, but then with human design it becomes even more specific, because you can see like, oh, let's say if it's in the sacral, then that means it's going to be something about like your life force energy and how you're doing things. Or if it's in the identity center, it's going to be a lot with purpose and love and direction. And then depending on what line it is in. So this is very like specific. Like this is, you don't, like if you're new to human design, don't think about this yet, but I'm just going to tell it because there might be someone who is already in their experiment and they're like, oh, new information. So then if you look at your, so if you have your chart, there's going to be on the left and right side, there's going to be all these planets and all these numbers. And there's going to be, let's say like 59.5 or 30.4 or like whatever. So
You
the,
could use mine as an example if you want to.
yeah. So for example, you have, uh, so you're a 2 6, like 6-2, but in the first, so the first ones on the left and the right, that's going to be the sun. Um, this, yeah, so you, that's where our profile lands, because that's like our core energy. So it's very much like this is the energy. But then if you go down all of those planets are also going to have a line number. So for example, you might be a 6-2, but then you have a lot of, let's say, 1 lines in those planets, which means that you're still going to want to be the researcher and investigator and stuff like this. So when you look at your south and north node, it's very interesting to look at, like, first of all, what gate it's in. So what is the energy, what is the theme of your south node or your north node? And then look at the profile and of like, okay, how am I embodying that? So if it's a 1, it's going to be a lot about investigating what this means. Or if it's a 3, it's going to be about trial and error and really experimenting with it. Or if it's a 6, then it's going to be this journey of first experimenting and then growing into this. So it's more about like, it's going to get better the like older you get kind of thing. Like it's that journey. So if you want to get specific, then first definitely look at your energy type. That's like how you work, like your aura, how like yeah. And then after that, with that also comes the strategy. So that's definitely important to look at because that's like how you then interact with the world. And then look at your profile lens, which is going to be in the sun gate. So the first profile lens. So you're a 6-2, I'm a 2-4. And then after that, it centers. And then I would say the south node and north node is going to be interesting to look at. And then if we go more into like business and stuff, there's going to be like how you communicate, or in your open centers is where like you said, like you're here to be a voice for others, like this type of stuff that we can be more specific and look into, like, okay, how does this look like for you? And even there, it's really to see like how does that work in your life, like right now? Like how does it really show up? Like, yes, we can read here, like, oh yeah, you're supposed to be like this, but it's like usually it's something that you embody already. And also with the south and north node, one thing to, which also probably most people are like, oh, but what about this? So there's this incarnation cross that usually if you generate your chart, there's going to be this thing called the incarnation cross. And you're like, well, what is this? And that is going to be in human design. I think if someone would Google and be like, oh, what's my purpose? Then probably the incarnation cross might come up. But as we know, the purpose is not a thing that we do. It's more like who we are. It's just our essence. It's our energy. So the incarnation cross is going to be the life theme, the energy that you carry throughout your life. And as with the south and north node, it's going to, like for the south and north node, it's going to switch, when you're, think around like 40, something like that. Maybe you know more about the astrology side of it.
Yeah, think around
Switch from
like
the south. Yeah.
fully embody around like 42, I think. That's
Yeah.
what I heard. Like
Yeah.
that's when you fully step into that embodiment of it.
Yeah. So if you're under that, then it's worth looking at the south node. And then if you're over that, you can look at the north node. And then with the incarnation cross, it's also something that becomes more present in your life when you get closer to your north node. So when you get older. But for example, for me, my incarnation cross, it's cross of rulership, and it's like my sun gate is very much like this leader. It's in 45. So if I look back at even being a child, I was always the one who's like, we're gonna play this and you go there and you go here. So it's like this energy that I will carry. But most likely, if you ask me in 10 years when I'm closer to 40, I'm gonna see it more clearly, and I'm gonna probably step more into that like leader more. But if I look at my life theme, I can definitely see that I am more in, like, that's just the energy that I carry. And it was funny, before this I was looking at like, oh, with coaching and everything, like, oh, what have I called like my coaching programs and stuff. And then what I had like 2 years ago, it's what called lead your own life. And I was just laughing at them because I'm wow, like that is the energy that I'm in. And not even looking, like I didn't know back then that that's like my thing, or I knew, but I did not connect it to that because I already knew about human design. But then now I'm like, oh, it makes so much sense. Like that's the energy I embody. So of course that's what I'm gonna help other people and like get, because everyone doesn't have that. And that's why we're here. Everyone has their unique gifts, and then we can support each other. But yeah, so south and north node and incarnation cross is like this next level when you look
It's
at
in depth,
specifically.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
So what truly happens when you choose to kind of like lean back and like embody, like lean back and just live in alignment with the energies of your chart? Is
Mhm.
is that when you're like in flow, like really
Yeah.
embodying the gates and the south node, north node and the energy and the profile? And
Mm.
so what
I
are
think,
the benefits of that?
yeah. Well, first, I would say it's, well, you can even actually, there's this thing called signature theme, and not self theme. So depending on your energy body type, you're going to have this feeling, this emotion that you feel if you are in alignment. So that's definitely something that's going to guide you. So for us generator types, we're going to feel satisfied after a work well done. If you're a manifestor, you're going to feel peace. If you are a reflector, you're gonna feel like your like life is so good, like it's surprising me in positive ways, like, oh yes, and that's what's gonna guide you. And projector, you're gonna feel like, yes, this was successful, I feel good, like, this was good, I was valued for what I see. So this is something that is gonna, of course, happen more the more you align with yourself. You're gonna start to feel more satisfied, you're gonna start to feel more peaceful. And then if you have, like, let's say now you can look at your not self, which for us is, for example, frustration. So if now you as a generator type feel a lot of frustration in your life, or anger as a manifester, or bitterness as a projector, or disappointment as a reflector, then you know that you're probably in those areas not living in alignment. So those two are going to guide you in, like, when we come to like real life actionable things that I love to, like, okay, but this information, but what does it mean? So this is something that you can really see, like, okay, do I feel like this in my life? But then in general, when you start to listen to your strategy and authority, or you start to just be aware of things, first of all, you can start accepting yourself more. You can start to accept and show compassion towards others because you see that, okay, but that person is like that. That person's energy works like that. They have this defined. They're, let's say they're a projector, and I'm a generator. Like, we work differently. So you're gonna start accepting yourself and others for who they are, and that's kind of the point. And if we think about that, like, if more people would accept and not try to change people, especially in relationships, let's say, then it would be easier. Life would be easier. So I think in a whole, like, your life will just become easier. Not that the way there is gonna be easy, because that takes a lot of acceptance and, like, shit, like, this is who I am and this is who they are and we can't really change. Of course, there's the deconditioning part, which is important, but at its core, like, as a generator type, this is how our aura works. We're here to respond. Like, it's not gonna help that we're gonna try to change ourselves to be someone who is initiating, because that's just gonna bring, like, the universe is gonna give us things that to struggle with, and it's just not gonna be in flow. So accepting that that's how it works, and then using it to your advantage. So
As a
that's,
tool for empowerment, right?
yeah,
That's how I
exactly.
like to see things. Like if it's
Yeah.
disempower you, like don't use it.
Yeah, exactly. And if it's not for you, don't use it. Or if it's not working, like, I know people who are like they don't, first, it's like, even for me, when I was looking at my chart and people would say things about me, and I'm like, that's not me. I don't accept that. And then slowly, when I would, like, because first, if someone, like, of course it's triggering to see some, like, really, like, wounds, or like, oh, this is how your shadow side shows up, and right now it's showing up, and it's so hard to accept. But when you start accepting, then you can start to move that energy and then see the other side of it, which is like everything in you is still like a superpower. It's like you, it's unique. So of course it's not going to be easy at first. And even, like, even my mentors, they've been with human design for like 20 years, and they've, and still they are sometimes so in their not self. And that's okay, because that's us being human. So it's not like we're supposed to be perfect, but it's just like a tool to help us maybe understand why something's happened, and just let it happen, because we're still, everyone, like, we as souls are communicating with each other, and depending on what people come on our path, there is some lessons to be learned and things. So it's not about, like, oh, now I'm a disappointment because I didn't do this the correct way according to my design. Like, no, it's like this is how you learn, and that's like the good. So I think it's just like a mindset in general. Like if you have this mindset of like life happens for you, not to you, then this is a great tool to also understand like, oh, this is why. And yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I think it's just so much valuable information here. Like, and I
Yeah.
love human design by that, just using that. And sometimes I even like, hey, let me just go back and like really dive a little bit deeper into my human design so I can
Mm.
get some confirmation of, oh, this is what I suppose. Oh, okay. Now it feels aligned. Like sometimes when you look at it, it's like, no, it doesn't really resonate with me right now. But when you go back and look at the same information or whatever it is, it's like, yeah, it makes sense now. Okay,
Yeah.
now I
Yeah.
understand because we both need the both sides of things to really feel what's
Yeah.
aligned or not. And
Exactly.
and I love that. So Matilda, where can if people are now like, hey, I want to know more about my human design and what
Mhm.
I'm here to do and what energy to embody, where can people
Yeah.
find you?
So I'm mostly on Instagram, Life with Matilda. That's how you're gonna find me. Also, my name, MathildaIsaksson.com, is my website. But I'd say Instagram is the way to connect, and then we can talk about it more there and see. Yeah, I just love to share human design. It's helped me so much, and also everything else, and just navigating through my own purpose as well. So yeah, but it was so lovely to speak about this, and it was so in alignment with yeah, everything that's showing up in my life as well right now. So
Yeah, it was really amazing to have you, Matilda, right from your right environment in your van life. And I think that's so funny. Maybe we should have an episode about that in the future about
yeah.
living life from a van. Like, how do you do that? I know that there's a lot of things that you share on your Instagram as well,
Yeah.
and it's really fascinating to me that you're doing that, and with your dog as well. It's really beautiful to follow your journey and thank you so much for coming on the Dancing Heart podcast today and for having this conversation and for bringing human design into awareness for more people.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Matilda, and thank you for tuning into this week's episode. Please like and subscribe, share it with your friends, and tag me on my Instagram. It's Tony Wiggum. Enjoy, and I will see you in the next episode. Ciao! Bye!